Hi everyone, I'm Gabriel and I am starting up my Science of Being Trans videos again. And this is my first one in the new series, and I thought it would be great to start with this particular subject because it's come up again on Twitter. So there's this guy who has decided to bring up this old article. It's from 2017. And I know a lot of people use this article as a way of like going, oh, you know, trans people, they're going too fast into the science, there's nothing to prove it, it could be dangerous, what are we going to do about it? So what I'm talking about are puberty blockers and their connection to cancer. So a lot of TERFs and transphobes and concerned parents have use this study as a way to prove that, oh, there's this link between puberty blockers and cancer, so we shouldn't ever give trans kids puberty blockers because it might lead to cancer later. And so I wondered, I'm like, where is this link? How did this link come about? What's the science behind the link? Is there any evidence towards it? And the more I did research on it, the less there actually was on this link between cancer and puberty blockers. So puberty blockers are given to trans kids in order to delay their puberty. They're also used for other things, and I'll get into that in a second. But these transphobes and TERFs and all these people, they like to use puberty blockers as a way to control trans people. Reality check, they don't actually really care about trans people. All they're trying to do is find a way to make it so that trans kids can't transition. And because almost no doctor will actually do anything permanent on anyone under the age of 16 and 18 in some cases, I know everywhere is a little bit different, puberty blockers are kind of the only way that trans kids can transition other than socially. So of course they want to attack the puberty blockers because of that. So reality check, there actually is no link between puberty blockers and cancer. I looked everywhere online and couldn't find anything. So there was only one journal article that I found that linked cancer with puberty blockers. And we're going to talk about that journal in a second because it's the one that everyone, and including that guy I just talked about earlier, the Twitter dude, have been citing on the link between puberty blockers and cancer. So if you get nothing else from this video, just know that there is actually no link between cancer and puberty blockers. The science just isn't there. So puberty blockers are actually used in trans kids to delay puberty so that they have time to figure things out. They're also given to cis kids in order to delay what's called precocious puberty. So cis kids, some of them, there's about a 1 in 5,000 chance that any kid will develop precocious puberty. And precocious just means that it's early, that it's aggressive, that it's, like a precocious child, right? A precocious child is a kid who at 2 years old is already talking in full sentences and that sort of thing. So precocious puberty basically means that it's puberty that begins too early. So puberty blockers have been given to these kids since the 80s. So that's almost 40 years of cis kids being given puberty blockers. And so far there has been no evidence that in cis children that the puberty blockers are a problem. So why would they be a problem in trans kids? Well, we know the answer. It's because people don't like trans people. So that's the problem. So there are two types of puberty blockers, and the first one is called Gonadotropin-releasing hormone, or GnRH. You'll see it abbreviated that way. And what that is actually, so gonadotropin, so gonad is like gonads, like your ovaries or ovaries or testes. And what that does is it actually overstimulates them, and then it causes them to stop releasing testosterone or estrogen, depending on which gonad you have. So it's kind of like, your sibling who keeps poking you, and they're poking you and it makes you mad, but eventually you just ignore them because they keep poking you, and so suddenly they just, you can ignore them. That's basically what gonadotropin-releasing hormone does. The other type is called an aromatase inhibitor, and these type are actually not given to trans kids. They're only used for precocious puberty. So the gonadotropin-releasing hormone is the one that we're actually going to be interested in for trans kids. The other thing that's great about all of these puberty blockers is they are completely reversible. Now, we're going to get into this in just a second, but they are reversible. So if you stop giving them, then like the gonadotropin-releasing hormone, it will then allow the gonads to produce the hormones that they would normally produce, either testosterone or estrogen, depending on which gonad you have. So there are side effects of puberty blockers, but they're not actually the ones that transphobes want you to know about. So transphobes will tell you that one of the side effects is actually an increased cancer risk. But again, we know that there is no sign of increased cancer risk, and I'll get more into that in a second. Basically, the side effects are local, which means at the site of the injection, so occasionally people get abscesses. That's if they didn't clean the skin well enough, or it gets infected, that sort of thing. That's pretty normal, and it's easy to reverse. You just get a little bit of antibiotics and it's fine. That's the case in anything that's injectable, So your testosterone, if you give estrogen injections, if you give insulin injections for people who have diabetes, that sort of thing, all of that side effect is the local irritation, potential for infection, that sort of thing. That's just the way it is. You're breaking the skin and injecting something foreign into it. That's just the way it happens. The other one is actually bone density loss, and this one can be a little bit more of a concern. So basically what that means is as you're taking the hormone, the puberty blocker, your bone density can go down. Luckily though, the bone density problems actually resolve whenever the puberty blockers are taken away. They can also be resolved by supplementing with calcium. So we know that it's a problem, so all you have to do is treat the problem. There are also benefits to puberty blockers. So gonadotropin-releasing hormone, the one that's actually given to trans kids, has actually been shown to shrink tumors in rats. So that's breast cancer. So obviously it can't cause cancer if it's causing tumors to shrink, right? And then the gonadotropin-releasing hormone itself is used to treat some prostate cancers and breast cancers. So it's actually great for a cancer drug, right? So again, there's no link between it causing cancer or increased risk in cancer when it's used to treat cancer. So where did this cancer concern come from? So I did extensive research of all of the science. I went to a bunch of these TERF sites, tried to figure out where they were getting this link between cancer and the puberty blockers, because there just is no link. And in fact, when gonadotropin-releasing hormone, which is the hormone that's given to kids as a puberty blocker, is used to treat cancer, how can there be a link? So I was like, there had to be something. So I found that there was this article in the New Atlantis that was written by 3 doctors that actually made this link. It's really long. I actually read all of it and looked through all the citations to see where this link was. So this was written again by 3 doctors, and so it's held up by transphobes and TERFs as this, like, gotcha, here's this 3 doctors say that puberty blockers cause cancer, and it's, we shouldn't ever give puberty blockers to kids because, look, they might get cancer when they're older, or they might get cancer now. And an initial look, it looked kind of bad. So they did show a link between puberty blockers and cancer, and it was kind of like, oh man. But then I actually looked harder at both the doctors and the actual science that they cited. In the article, the authors actually admit, so they admit this, like, this is their own words here. They admit that puberty blockers are reversible. That's like one of the concerns, right? That puberty blockers aren't reversible, and that these poor kids are going to be stuck in like no puberty, but they admit it's reversible. But then they go on to quibble about what they mean by reversible. So they say, oh, these kids don't go through puberty at the right time, they don't go through it with their peers, even though there's 40 years of evidence that shows that giving puberty blockers to kids actually helps them, and that it's reversible. They quibble over, well, it's not actually reversible because the kids don't go through it at the same time as their peers. Okay, I guess, but is puberty really all that important, that we go through it all at the same time? What would the delay of 2 or 3 years do to anyone? Well, because they've actually given this to cis children for 40 years, they have some evidence of that. The authors also admit that puberty blockers do not affect development in cis kids. So that was one of the concerns, is that because these kids aren't actually going through puberty at the age that they're supposed to, that it could cause a problem with brain development later on. But they haven't found that link. So there's nothing wrong with the kids, the cis children, who go through the puberty blockers and precocious puberty and then go through puberty a couple of years later. They haven't found a link. So these authors actually admit that their two main big problems with puberty blockers don't actually exist. One of their other main concerns is about kids who actually desist. So they have this huge long screed about how there are all these kids who are gender nonconforming and they all desist. But then they actually go on and complain that all those people, all those gender nonconformers that were put on puberty blockers, then go on to cross-sex hormones. It's because they're trans. That's why they go on cross-sex hormones, right? So the large number of gender non-conforming children that desist don't actually exist. The ones that desist probably weren't trans to begin with. And so they may go on puberty blockers, they may not, and then they go off and they desist and they're fine. But the vast majority, and in fact, these authors complain about the vast majority of kids who go on puberty blockers then go on to cross-sex hormones. And it's because they're children, it's because they're trans, not because they desist. Huh, imagine that. Yet there's still no cancer link. We haven't heard anything about cancer, so where is this coming from? In the journal article, these three doctors actually have only one study that shows that there is, or that they claim that there is a link between cancer and puberty blockers. So I was like, oh, okay, here we go. Finally, a link between cancer and puberty blockers. But you know what? I actually read the study and looked at the study and the science and everything that they actually cite. And the science that they actually cite to support this claim that there's a link between puberty blockers and cancer, there's no evidence in it. The authors of that study, so the one that is cited in the New Atlantis one, actually says, so this is their science here, okay? So this is what I got from their article. There is no increased risk in puberty blockers given to kids for cancer. The puberty blocker group, so the group that was treated with puberty blockers, had what they called testicular microcalcifications. And they weren't entirely certain what those were, but they couldn't find a link between that or cancer. So there is no link. So the one journal article that these doctors cited as their smoking gun for cancer and puberty blockers actually concludes the opposite, that there is no link between these testicular microcalcifications, what they don't really know anything about, and cancer. So they claim there is no statistical significance, so no clinical significance. Is it possible that these testicular microcalcifications could be linked to cancer? Maybe. But the authors themselves concluded that there wasn't. So here we go. There's no scientific support. Even in the articles cited by this journal article, there is no support for a link between cancer and puberty blockers. Besides that, any risk for testicular cancer, and that's the only risk that you could find for these puberty blockers, would actually be alleviated with GnRH. So if a trans girl has testicles and she went on puberty blockers and she has these testicular microcalcifications, it would just go away whenever she had GnRH. So as long as she had GnRH before she actually developed cancer in the testes, she'd be fine. All right, so let's talk about this journal article a little bit. So I was looking at it and I'm like, how can three doctors make such horrible connections when there isn't any connection? They've caused this huge panic in parents of trans kids, showing this link between cancer and puberty blockers and all of that. Who are these people? First of all, I want to talk about the journal itself. So you may have noticed that I did not say it was published in the New Atlantic. It was published in the New Atlantis. So that's New Atlantis, as in Atlantis, the imaginary continent, right, that doesn't exist. So the New Atlantis is actually not a journal at all. It's a collection of essays, blog posts. So it might be in print, but it's not peer-reviewed, it's not scientific, and there's some other weirder links that I'll get into in a second. So this study, this review, wasn't even published in an actual scientific journal. So I did more digging to find out more about New Atlantis and why three doctors, right, supposedly these really knowledgeable folks, why they would publish in something called New Atlantis. So I dug into the journal itself, and here I'm actually going to quote. So the New Atlantis journal was founded by a group of people dedicated, now this is their own words, dedicated to applying Judeo-Christian moral tradition to critical issues of public policy. Not scientific. It's not scientific at all. It's basically just propaganda. So here we have a study that actually isn't a study, that's been published in a journal that actually isn't a journal, that's already biased against trans people because it's evangelical Judeo-Christian. So what about the authors themselves? So I figured maybe these authors were duped. Who knows? I'd be willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. However, not anymore. So I did some digging. So the three authors are, and I'm going to get their names right here, Paul Hughs, Lawrence Mayer, and Paul McHugh. So some of these names might be familiar to you. The first one, so Dr. Hughs spoke at a Theology of the Body conference in May 2018. Basically, same deal with the New Atlantis journal. They are a group, and he belongs to this group, or he spoke at this conference. They want to apply Judeo-Christian morals to other people. So Theology of the Body conference. Dr. Lawrence Mayer actually believes that being gay is a choice and that trans people don't actually exist. So I'm sure he's really qualified to talk about trans issues in a way that's unbiased, right? So gay people don't exist? Maybe not. And Paul McHugh, so Dr. McHugh, he's an Orthodox Catholic. He also believes that being gay is a choice. He believes in conversion therapy. He calls transgender people imposters and caricatures, and then also advocates for intersex surgeries. Ew. So what that means is this guy believes that intersex people who have ambiguous genitalia, should have surgery done on their genitalia without them either knowing or consenting about it. So these three doctors, I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt, but considering this information, not really. So to reiterate, this study that all of these people, all these transphobes, these TERFs, are going, yeah, you see, there's this link between cancer and puberty blockers. First of all, there is no link between puberty blockers and cancer. The study that was even cited by the only journal article that actually links puberty blockers and cancer doesn't even support that either. The article that does cite this information was submitted to a place called the New Atlantis, which is evangelical Judeo-Christian trying to apply Judeo-Christian morals to science, and was written by 3 people who are known transphobes. So debunked, it doesn't exist. There is no link between puberty blockers and cancer. We can all please put this BS to rest. There just is no link at all. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm sorry if you hear some weird sounds. I'm actually right on a street, and so there's going to be door closings and stuff like that. I tried to minimize as much as possible. So if you like what I'm doing, please subscribe. I will try to do more videos like this as much as I can. Can't promise anything, but I do want to start up this Science of Being Trans again, where I debunk a lot of these myths and where I talk to actual trans people about the science behind transitioning and all that sort of thing. So if you're interested, please give me a subscribe, share the video, and let other people know about it. Thanks a lot, and see you later.